evening, everybody. I'm so excited to have my second in a series of Plan, Prepare, Protect series that is coming out of the Registrar Wills office. Good evening. My name is Tracey Gordon. I'm your Registrar Wills and your Clerk of Orphans Court. I'm so happy to be able to do this type of series in the trying time of COVID-19. And I'm just so happy that many of us are getting used to using the computers and our smartphones so we can bring you this information at this trying time so that we won't have to bring you outside of your house to be exposed to the COVID. So I hope everybody is safe and continue to wear their masks when they go out and wash your hands. That's very important. So I just want to take the time to introduce the state representative from the 192nd District, Miss Honorable Morgan Cephas. I just wanted to say that I've known her for years. I met her first when she came as a young lady working for Councilman Curtis Jones in City Hall. And I remember when I first met her, you know, she just was always so dignified and respectful and classy, and she always dressed to the nines. And I just want to say I'm really proud of you because I seen you start off, you know, I'm sure as an intern and work your way up to the elected official in West Philly and the other parts of your district, I believe is Overbrook and Winfield. But just say a few words. Why you think, you know, why you know for a fact that our partnership is really needed at this trying time here in Philadelphia with the gentrification that's going on and just everything with people losing jobs because of COVID-19. And I just want to say that you can reach me anytime if you need any help from my office.
You know, just thank you so much for having me be a part of tonight's discussion. And thank you, madam. I mean, I've watched, you know, yourself grow just as much as I've grown. I feel like we've been in this political game together, growing and, you know, taking our rightful seats at the table as African-American women. I mean, you've made history already. And
thank you. And so did you. Were you? Oh no, you were
not
actually
the first,
maybe second because the Honorable Louise Bishop,
yeah,
I love.
Miss Bishop.
No, absolutely not. Not the Reverend.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. She is still on the radio. I don't know how she does it Sunday mornings to bring great words of wisdom. She's always been amazing. Still, you know, a dear friend of mine to this day. And she has some pretty big shoes to fill. And, you know, I'm just happy I have the opportunity to continue her legacy. And
yes,
both of us are continuing, you know, strong legacies of African-American women. And, you know, I just want to applaud you for being innovative at a time that has been really difficult for us all. Not only are we dealing with COVID-19, I mean, we touched, you know, over 200,000 deaths as a related to the virus just yesterday or over the past couple of days.
Yeah.
So not just dealing with COVID, but dealing with the civil unrest. I mean, our hearts are still bleeding and mourning for Breonna Taylor and, you know, just the
and you know, it is, you know, especially for Black women, like it is very with this gun violence and you know, our children are just angry. These boys are angry, and we really have to figure out a way why you know they're so angry, and it's mental. It has a lot to do with mental illness. Mm-hmm. It has a lot to do with trauma.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if we need to address that because there's some trauma going on in these households, and then we're coming post the crack cocaine. The crack cocaine era was not far away, you know, and that's how we ended up like losing our bearings and our houses. Absolutely. And now that Philadelphia is the hottest market on the East Coast, we got to figure out a way how we preserve our generational wealth so we can pass this wealth down to our children. Because, I mean, fortunately, I'm happy to say my son just purchased his first home at 28. Great. But the realtor said that he was the first young Black man that ever came in with that type of credit, that perfect credit.
That's great.
And I was like, look, I was hard on them, but it's going to be harder and harder for us to buy homes. So we need to hold on to the little row house that we have.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you. And I'm glad that you're, again, being innovative and taking this throughout the city of Philadelphia. Because as you've stated, Philadelphia is a hot purchasing market. I mean, with our distance between Washington, D.C. and New York, and the cost of living.
Jersey and Delaware, too.
Jersey, Delaware, our cost of living isn't as high. You have access to cultural institutions, a vibrant center city, and we still have grass and trees. So we have become, a mecca and a hotspot for outside developers to come and, purchase homes and, flip them, and you name it, they're here. And I think.
And also stealing homes.
Oh, absolutely. And I think
that's a big thing too.
It's really important for us to have these conversations, because as we're trying to pass and generate wealth, we have the ability to do that through home ownership. And as you stated earlier, I represent a series of neighborhoods. So Overbrook, Haddington, Carroll Park, Overbrook Farms, Green Hill, Winfield, Overbrook Park. And we have a lot of housing stock where we do have a lot of senior citizens that are passing on. And one of the biggest challenges that we have to address in our office is how to manage that. How's the next generation able to not just acquire the home, but what are the steps? What are the processes to ensure that they keep that asset in the family? And, it's critical to have these type of conversations early and often, even though they're very difficult. It's very difficult to, even just process things as you're going through the loss of a loved one, but you want to ensure that those assets are protected. So again, I want to thank you for bringing this discussion to the 192nd virtually. But, just want to reinforce that it's important for us to have this conversation about wills. As we all know, maybe close to a little less than 57% of individuals actually have wills. When it comes to the millennial generation, of which I'm a part of, I'm a little on the later end, even less of us have had wills drafted and have developed estate planning. We're also going to be talking about inheritance tax, which, not a lot of us know about, that you do have to pay taxes on assets and dollars that are transferred. But we're also going to be talking about estates. Again, one of the great things with the baby boomer generation and their parents, the big thing was home ownership. And when we have these houses that have been acquired by these generations, it's what's happening, who's having the conversation with the next generation.
Right.
In that asset. And again, whether it be that you live in the asset or you possibly turn it into a rental property. But the key thing is to maintain that property. And there, again, have been so many cases that have come throughout my office, residents in tears because they, had their property stolen, taken right up under them, not even knowing. So, I'm really happy that you're having this discussion, bringing these conversations out into the community. And again, my door is always open, and I'm just looking forward to tonight's conversation.
Thank you. And I was also telling, before we start broadcasting, I wanted your listeners to know something that I realized when I did census in your area before, because I used to be a census worker. And what surprised me when I came to knock on the doors is, besides having the 5 and 6 bedrooms and the old molding and all the original hardware floor, I noticed that it was 3 to 4 generations in the house. So it was Big Mama, and then her daughter, and then her daughter, and then sometimes she might have her child in high school. So I would see generations live in those houses, and I was like, oh wow, people actually still live together. You see it a lot in New York. My daughter lives in New York. You have no other choice. You have to live together because how the stock is. But I was really surprised when I came over into your area to see that, you had like a lot of generations there. And so this is all more important that we need to educate them, because Big Mama is not in her 50s anymore. You know, she's older, and a lot of times, it may be those generations, but it may be sisters and brothers that live in their own homes, and maybe you do intend on leaving that home to the daughter that lives there, but you didn't put it in writing, and those are when some of the complications come in. And so I just wanted to let you know that, that's something that I noticed, and for your listening audience to be mindful that, all the information you take, because I have my notes here, that is important that you can write it down. And we're going to put information up there where you can contact us. And also, in addition to that, my solicitor, Attorney Sharon Wilson, she'll be on. I have some tough questions that you all sent. So make sure you all have pens and papers so you can write some of this stuff down. And also my assistant solicitor, Terry Booker, she's on to help support us. I have a new initiative that we are getting ready to launch to help citizens be able to get deeds in their name and out of the dead people's name. So I just wanted to start off to say that basically what we do at the Registrar of Wills, or my role, is to oversee the transfer of generational wealth. And I am a state agency. Even though we get our budget from the city, we are a state agency. Last year we brought in close to $7 million, and our basic budget was a little under $5 million. So we are self-sustaining. We collect real estate. We collect estate taxes, and every year we send to Harrisburg between $80 and $100 million per year, Morgan. So I wanted you to note that for the record. So when they say, oh, Philadelphia, and they want to just put crime, no, we are a first-class city, and we send a lot of money to the state. And I'll repeat.
That's amazing. How much was it again?
$80 to $100 million.
Okay.
To the state. Right. Last year we sent 80.
Nice.
Okay?
Nice.
And so that's important to know because a lot of people don't know what we do, and they find out what we do either when somebody dies and then they'll come looking to us for the will. We'll get to that. Or you don't know that you're coming to us when you're coming to get your marriage license or a record. I oversee that as well. And so briefly, some of the things that we do is we validate wills. Again, I told you we collect inheritance tax, estate tax. We probate estates. We'll get into that shortly. I assign executive privileges. We have to issue short certificates when you're trying to get the dead person assets or money. You have to come to us for those certificates so you can show that you are the one that they're supposed to give it to. And a real important thing that we do that most people don't know is we preserve and protect archives. We have archives that date back to the 1600s. We have William Penn's original will. We have John Wanamaker's. We have John Rittenhouse. Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner, they got married. We have their marriage, a copy of their marriage records. And so we set public policy. I just recently had to set some policy during COVID-19. And instead of shutting down because I knew it was essential, we was able to allow people to get married virtually by way of a Quaker marriage. And you can go on our website and it goes into depth what it is. That was established back in the 1600s with the Quakers. The Quakers didn't believe that they needed an official to preside over their wedding. They believed it was between the man and the woman and God, self-serving marriages. And so that's how we were able to continue allowing people that were citizens of Philadelphia to get married during COVID. We're open now by appointment only, but we were allowed to do that because we went into a state of emergency. So I could put an executive order like that from the Register of Wills. In addition to that, when people die, you have to get to their estates. So some of these estates had, people were calling me and they had stocks and bonds. When COVID, remember when the market hit? people die, their heirs is like calling us like, I need to get this probated so I can get, get the executor over the state so we can stabilize our stocks. That's how deep it was. And what we did, we were the first in the state, and I would say the East Coast, because we were interviewed by New York Times about, we were still marrying people during this trying time. So I'm proud to say I have close to 70 employees, and they all worked hard. We was able to do everything remotely and with very minimum coming out. And we're now open now by appointment only, and that's on our website as well. And we have made our office socially distant and put up the shields. And I mean, we are really essentially the only one that's open in City Hall. And I'm thankful because my workers thought it was important that we serve you all. So let's talk about wills and the importance of having them and the consequences when you don't. So a will is just simply a document that you write during your lifetime to distribute your assets. So you own a house, you want to make sure you have a will. So if you die, here's who I want to inherit my things, my assets. And you may even put in there, and I want this person to be the executor, because you want to make sure that if you die and you still have minor children or incapacitated children that can't, do for themselves, you want to have a will to say, hey, here's who I want to take care of my children. Here's this is my last will and testament, signed at the bottom. You can do it. You can make your own will right now and sign it at the bottom right now, and it's just as valid. But we always tell people to go to a lawyer or go to some of the free will clinics, and there's plenty of them that you can find on our website as well that will assist you in making a will. So a lot of times people do not want to make wills because they're superstitious. They think they're going to die or whatever, but everybody's going to die. Or I know a lot of people say they don't want to have a will because they don't want to make the decision of who they're going to leave, what to, they'll say the good old saying is, look, I ain't worried about it, I'll be dead. But you don't realize the things that happen after you die between families. And I'll tell y'all a few stories, as I go on, but it's really very sad because when you don't leave a will, you have to come to our office, and I have to follow the law of the state of Pennsylvania. And we have to go through intestate. So, of course, the spouses are first. But say, for instance, is your mother. And your mother said she raised a granddaughter. And Jamila, I want Jamila to have my house. And she told all of y'all, all 4 children, Jamila, y'all have your own houses. Jamila, I want her to be good. And she dies without the will. So if it's not in writing, it don't count. And how many times do you think that all 4 of those siblings is going to say, let's sign this renunciation over so Jamila can get the house, the deed in her name? Or is it one of them going to say, well, I want my share because that's what the law says? But if the grandmother would have put a will, then the will would dictate where that house is going. So unfortunately, when she dies, without the will, it becomes a tangled title. But before I get to the tangled title, I want to talk to you all about the fact that most people think when they go back, Tasha, I'm not ready. When they think that when they make the wills, they come to us. The Registrar wills in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, we don't store wills. You're supposed to put your will up and let somebody know. Sometimes people die and they have the will and it's like, this is my personal business, but they don't tell anybody. And so that, if you don't tell anybody where your will, then that doesn't count either. So your will is not effective until you die And we don't get the will until you die. So a lot of times people will think, hey, my mom died, my grandfather died, and they'll come to our office and say, I'm coming to see about the will. We don't have it. The will is stored wherever the person, the creator of the will. And if she doesn't tell somebody or a couple people where the will is, then that becomes a problem. And so one of the things that if you are going to write a will right now, because you can't get to an attorney or you may can't afford one because of COVID, you write down your assets, and remember, to make it valid in Pennsylvania, it has to be signed at the bottom, and you have to be at least 18 years or older and definitely of sound mind. I just wanted to ask Sharon, is there anything that I may have left out that you think is important for her audience, the state rep
There's
audience?
nothing that you left out, but there is something that I'd like to add. Sometimes people don't want to tell people where their will is because they don't want them to know what's in it, and they don't want to leave it in their house because they live in a house where people roam and look for things. So if you have your attorney prepare your will, one of your options is to tell the attorney, could you keep my will for me? And we as attorneys, we have safekeeping options, most of us. If you want to leave your will with your attorney, you might want to, maybe you can just leave a copy at home. That doesn't prevent you from having to tell somebody, at very least, I made a will and I left it with my attorney. So that's just another option for you to think about.
Yeah. So, one, when you purchase that property, and this is not just because people also think, and Sharon can attest to this, that you make your will when you get old. No, you make your will when you get an asset, because you don't have, you're not a fortune. You don't know how long you're going to live. You don't even know if you're going to outlive your kids. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to, you all in the state and the Real Estate Association, that somehow maybe they would incorporate, upon, transfer of a deed or selling a house, that one of the things they say is, here's some information on a will and here's why. Because at this point, you had this, you said 57% of the people have wills. Where'd you get the stat from? Because, that's pretty good. I really haven't ran into too many people.
It's a national
Yeah.
stat. So it's not really.
That includes all peoples, right? But if we just talk about communities of color, that number is much lower than that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the main thing that I want you all to get out of just making a will is start having a conversation. Start having it with your neighbor, your friends, the churches. We're going to start going out to the churches, and we're going to go out everywhere to talk to people about making a will, because that is a sure shot way to protect your generational wealth. That is a sure shot way, because you may not even have any children, but if you have grandkids, or you have maybe even a good friend, or even maybe your church, you still need to make the will so you can, transfer your generational wealth. You want to leave it to a charity, but sometimes when you leave it sit, that's why you see a lot of those abandoned properties in our community. Somebody died and didn't have any family or relatives, and now you get speculators that are going around to empty houses, and that's a sure shot way of them being able to steal your hard-earned work or money, and so that's one of the things that we're saying, because what we're finding is we are currently what I call a state of emergency, because we have a lot of people that are in tangled titles. And a tangled title or deed is referred to as tangled when a death has occurred in the chain of the title. And so often the last deed title is in the name of the dead person. So the people that's living there or have been taught that it's their property because it's heir property. Heir, like it's, which is no such thing. And so what happens is you can't do anything legal with the property until you come down to us to probate the property. And that becomes sometimes, it can become messy, because what happens is you can't, say for instance, you want to sell the property, you can't sell it because it's not in your name. If you want to leave it to your kids, you can't leave it to anybody because it's not in your name. And then you come around and say, we got basic system repairs where the government provides you with all these free, free programs that you can get plumbing done, you can get electric done, you could get all kinds of things done with your house. But when you go to apply, they say, well, who's the owner? You say, I'm the owner. They say, well, show proof of ownership. And then it's still in your mother's name or your grandmother's name or your aunt's name, and they're dead. And then you don't qualify for it. And I found out my daughter went to Puerto Rico, Morgan State Rep, and she said that they don't even qualify for FEMA because the houses is not in their names. So even government assistance, you can't get it because the house is not in your name. You can't take out equity loans on it. It's almost as if you're like a squatter. And so these are the challenges. So then, you think it's your property, and so you come down to us and you're the granddaughter, hypothetically. And it's like, well, my grandmother died. I'm trying to come to get, the probate to get the deed and the name. And it's like, now we got to go to the Constitution, the Pennsylvania law, and it's going to say, well, did your grandmother have children? And she said, yeah, we have 4 kids. Well, then you got to go to all those 4 kids if they're alive. And if they're not, if 2 of them are dead and they had 5 kids or 3 kids, all of them count. And it just becomes like you have to open up all these estates. And that's where it becomes messy.
And remember a long time ago, we talked about the fact that the last time they did the survey, that approximately 60% of the people in Philadelphia lived in a home that was deeded with a deed that did not have their name on it. So this isn't like this esoteric problem that some people have. There are a lot of us here in the city that have this problem, and we really need to address it.
And if you don't, and I always say this, I said, and if you don't have a will now, you're a potential tangle title, because if something happens to you, you don't have a will. So that's why we're saying, we're trying to be very aggressive on it. And one of the ways that I found out that this is a persistent problem here in Philadelphia is I've talked to a lot of attorneys that work with these community agencies like Philadelphia VIP, Senior Law Project, Community Legal Services, Christian Legal Services. And they came to me and said they were having a huge problem because they have the ability to help these people get the houses out of their name, but the fees is too high for them, because sometimes it's layer and layer of estates. So if you have to come, because there was no will, and you have to probate the estate, each of the states, you have to pay the probate fee, and probate fees are anywhere between $400 and $600. And imagine if you had to open up 4 of those. And they were saying that was hindering them from helping our constituents. And so we immediately came up with a think tank, and we came up with a program that we're getting ready to launch. We're in our final stages. It's called the Probate Deferment Initiative, or PDI. And this is, we're deferring fees. We're not waiving them because I can't legally waive them, but we're deferring the fees so it can help you get out of the dead person there and get in the deed name, so you can start conducting businesses, so you can live and thrive with your family. The only condition that we ask is that if you decide to sell the house, we're placing a lien so we can collect our fees. And we also want that you make a will, because we're not trying to make we will help you, we help you transfer the deed in your name and then you die without a will. No, we want to educate you. And so
Do you also allow people to, I guess, pay the fees over time? If
Well, as long as you stay in the house, we're not asking for the fees. We
okay,
defer.
okay.
Oh, you stay in the house?
No, that's incredible. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah, we're not coming knocking on your door every, month or whatever. We're not going to call. We deferring them, and we got an agreement. And this initiative was a team effort, but it was led by Terry Booker, my attorney. She's on, and she even went over to the deed because people think that deeds and the register of wills is it's two different offices. So once you get it probated, then you have to go over to the deeds department to actually get it done. And so they've deferred or waived their fees. They're not going to charge them the fees either. And so we're going to have a lot more information for you and your constituents, so we can help them untangle these titles so they can, pass down their generational wealth properly and they can save their homes. You can't get a mortgage. You can't even go to a bank to fix an unpaid mortgage. So it's just like if somebody died and they're still paying a mortgage on the house. You can't make arrangements or payment arrangements because it's in the dead person's name. And so you really could have. I'll just tell you a really short story. You all, where it was a lady, and Terry, you can chime in if I miss any. I was so happy to help her. Her fiance died, and they weren't married, and no such thing as common law in the state of Pennsylvania. And I think maybe Sharon could chime in a little bit about that too. So anyway, before I came, she had came and was just kind of doing all this detective work because she was really trying to save the house. It was a nice house in Mount Airy, but she wasn't married to him, And I think when she finally came back, I was registered at the time, and she just had all these papers, and she just looked so frustrated. And it was like we have to still go by, we have to go by the law. You wasn't married to him. There's no such thing as common law. And just before he died, Terry, if you're in, he put her name on the
on the paper as a third party to the mortgage. So
yes.
she was able to, communicate because she had a vested interest at that point because he placed her on the mortgage.
So I was able to give her, what gave her the, she became the executor.
Yes. Yep.
She became the executor over the estate. And because we were so patient with her, and when she pulled out that last piece of paper, I mean, she started crying. And when we seen that, we was allowed to, send her to the program to help you save your home. And that was the only thing that saved her. Now, had he not done that, for whatever reason, maybe he got sick and he put on this so she could continue to do the business for him while he was alive, that actually was enable her to be able to save the home. But this is another thing that complicates situations. Common law marriage, there is no such thing as common law marriage in the state of Pennsylvania. You have to get a real marriage license and get married. Sharon, you could take over with this part of it.
We know we've talked about common law before, and the fact that unfortunately there is no common law marriage in Pennsylvania after the year 2005. So if you believe that you are married, you have to show that you are in a common law relationship prior to that time. There's no common law, of course, for people who are already married. Some people believe that even if they're still married, if they start living with somebody else, they can be common law with that person. No. If you're already married, you can't then develop a common law relationship. If you're a same-sex couple, you cannot develop a common law relationship in Pennsylvania. And if you're a child under the age of 18, you can't develop a common law relationship. And the thing about common law, when you come to the Register of Wills and you say, my common law husband has died, That's only the beginning of the conversation. As the register mentioned, we're bound by law. So you have to prove that you were common law. You have to prove, and it's not an easy thing to prove. Yes, there are lots of documents that we can look at. We can look at, did you file your tax returns together? We can look at, did you tell people, do you wear a ring? Did you ever have a ceremony? But it's still a very high standard that you have to meet. And remember, just because you say you are common law doesn't mean that other children that exist, either your own or your spouses or your common law spouses, may object to that. And so then we may end up in a hearing trying to decide whether or not you are common law. So the best thing to do would be to explore those assets and how they want them left prior to the death, because you can leave a will in your will, you can leave your assets to anybody you want, married or not married. But common law marriage will not protect you any longer.
And so, we have a lot of sad stories when it comes down to that. I skipped over something that I felt was very important to talk about as far as wills. And when I told you that, you can physically write your will and sign it. And so the best practice is to have two people to witness this and to have it notarized. And but the law does not require that you have a witness. Another thing that I learned is when you have a lawyer draw up your will, you need to ask for the what's the word? Self-sustained, so you don't have to have the witnesses.
Self-proven affidavit. Yep.
Self-proving.
Self-proven affidavit. That means that your two witnesses that you have witnessed your will at the time, when they come to probate the will, they don't have to go find those witnesses. They don't have to bring them to the Registrar of Wills. So just remember, when you go to your attorney or whoever is doing your will, make sure that you ask them for that. So when you die, your relatives or whoever your executor is or whatever, they don't have to go track down those witnesses, because those witnesses may disappear, And so this is a problem, but this is a challenge for us to be able to get the word out. Cephas, and I would like for to meet with you so we can talk to the state legislator, to even let them know that this is a problem here in Philadelphia, and we want some possible reprieve, because after they do probate, we're going to have to deal with the inheritance tax issues, and a lot of people don't probate wills, or they just keep them in their friend's name. I mean, in the deceased person's name, because they don't want to pay inheritance tax. And so Sharon will go over a little bit about, why we pay inheritance tax and why you shouldn't try to avoid it.
Yeah, inheritance tax is just a transfer tax. So when your property passes from one person to another by virtue of death, you pay a tax, and that's called the inheritance tax. How much you pay depends on a couple of things, but primarily it depends on the value of what's in your estate. So how much that house or all the other assets are worth. Next slide. The taxes are also dependent upon the relationship of the people who are going to receive the assets. So if I'm giving things to my spouse, to my husband or to my wife, it's free. If I'm giving things to my children or my grandchildren, it gets taxed at 4.5%. If I'm giving things to my nieces or my nephews, it's taxed at 15%. If I'm giving things to my brothers or my sisters, it's taxed at 12%. So you need to understand, the closer the person is to you in relationship biologically, the less tax you pay. If you're giving money to charities, you pay 0%. Now the register doesn't take the money, but the register is an agent for the state of Pennsylvania. And that money that she was talking about that she sends to Harrisburg, that's that money. That's the primary source of that money. She collects it. She's an agent. So you don't have to go all the way to Harrisburg to pay your tax. You can go right here in Philadelphia and pay your state inheritance tax. And that'll also keep you from having to pay more interest, because by the time it gets to Harrisburg, you may owe a little bit more interest on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And remember, no matter how much a pain you think it is, if you don't pay your inheritance tax, it just continues to accumulate interest. Sometimes interest and penalties, depending on the situation. So the state has been pretty good about allowing you to enter into some type of payment arrangement, so that even if you can't pay it outright, start to pay on it, so that you don't end up having a large lien against a property that you receive just because you couldn't afford the inheritance tax, or you didn't want to go about. You just didn't want to pay it. It's worth it. It's one of the lower taxes, as a matter of fact. So if you receive assets, pay your inheritance tax.
And so one of the things that I wanted to talk to the state legislators about, in partnership with our PDI program and probate deferment program, is because it's so persistent in Philadelphia, maybe it could be possible if we could have a moratorium or a discount, or we want people to stay in their homes. It costs the city and state more money when they lose the homes and they become abandoned and they come homeless. And so you're still getting the 80 to 100 million, but right now, we're spending a lot on, homelessness, and, we have these basic system repairs that are there to assist people, and they can't get the assistance because it's not legally their property, because you can't legally, sign papers or legal papers for somebody to do something in the house. And guess what else you can't get? You can't get insurance. You know how dangerous that is to live in a row house? I mean, a row house, we're attached.
Right, on both sides.
The next house is down yonder. We are attached. So if, I had a couple years ago, it was a really bad fire next door to me. You would not believe the stench of the smoke damage that I had. But I had insurance. So what happens if your house catches on fire? How many people have that much money in the bank that can help them to repair the house? Or what if there's a flood? We have floods a lot all over. You can't do anything because you don't own the property. You can't get the insurance. And so these are some of the consequences when we don't understand the importance of minding our business or being more financially literate. And I think that our city, I will say at our city, I'm talking about us, and even our state can take some blame for that, because I think we have a social responsibility to help people. We have a social responsibility to teach our children in school, what is a will, what is a trust, what is an estate, what is a deed. Why should they learn at the time of the death? At your most vulnerable time. You should be prepared for it. I mean, everybody's going to die. We need to have to start preparing for this so you can make sure that your family has rightful ownership of what you worked for so long. And so that's my sole mission in Philadelphia. One house at a time, knock on one door at a time, go to one meeting at a time. I created an outreach department that has never been there. And they're doing a really good job of, reaching out to you all and letting you know that, relentlessly, I want to go out and educate. I need you. We have to save our homes. Where are you going to live nowadays? With your job, jobs is up and down, the COVID is just kind of making you more aware of, hey, I have to stay in this house now. I mean, Home Depot broke records during
Mm.
COVID
Mhm.
because people start saying, hey, oh, since I got to be in this house, let me fix it up. Or let me throw a deck out here because like when it first came, you didn't see no cars. It was just, and so people are starting to realize this. And what good is it that you as our representative or state representative, and we get all this money and we can't even, our constituents that vote for us can't even get the basic system repairs to help them with the plumbing or help them with electrical work so it won't catch on fire, or a chimney liner so you won't get carbon monoxide, or your hot water heater broke and or the heater broke, and we live in Philly, so it's at least 4 months. It's gonna be, you're gonna need some heat, and we can't even help those people because of a technicality that I feel the city of Philadelphia, we failed to educate people about it, and that's what I want to do, and that's why I want to partner with you and throw some ideas around to you all, because I'm sure once we announce this program and we launch it, we're going to get an influx, because they have to go through the agencies, through a lawyer, because it's really hard. It's a lot of paperwork in the state. So, go through the lawyer, the agencies, and then when we get to the point where they have to open so many estates and estate tax, maybe we might have to go to Harrisburg and say, hey, can we get a waiver or deferment or something, or can we decrease it? Because if you say no, you're not going to get the taxes anyway. At least we saving houses. So that's something that I wanted to talk to you about. I know we wrapping it up, and they sent some really, really detailed questions that Sharon, Attorney Wilson, is going to go over. I read those questions, and I'm like, yeah, I'm glad Sharon's here, the attorney. Because I don't know that.
I'm going to be attorney too.
I'm just the administrator. I'm not the lawyer. So, Sharon,
I'm glad to be here to answer these questions. And I just want to say before I get started that these are 5 very good questions that were submitted to us from the state rep. And I also want you to understand that these questions are expanding our conversation beyond what just the Register of Wills does. And we're doing that because you elected a register that really wants to start a conversation, not just sit in the office and take your wills or tell you sorry, no, but to actually give you education about this area. So while you can't come to the registrar's office and ask for more information about what I'm telling you now, what she did do was make sure that she hired a solicitor that has experience in a broad wealth for this kind of conversation, okay? So the first question that I have is, what is the best way to change a deed to leave the property to someone? I'm going to give you the lawyer answer that you hate, and that is, it depends. I need to know, what's your goal? If you leave a property in trust of, then what you're saying is, I'm not leaving it outright to that person because there is something that exists that makes me not want to give it to them right now. Maybe that person is too young. Maybe they're the subject right now, they're battling a drug addiction. Maybe they're just not as responsible as you like them to be. But if you leave a property in trust of someone else, it should be a reason for doing that. The second way that the question suggests is, well, should I leave the property with right of survivorship? What that means is, I leave the property to, let's say, to 2 people, and the one that lives the longest, the one that survives, is the one that has the property. Is that a good way to do it? Sure. If you want to leave it to your children, for example, and make sure that it stays with your children, and you don't want to pick between the 2 of them, you say, I'll leave it to both of them. And while they're both living, they will jointly own it. And then when one of them dies, that surviving child would have it by themselves. Now, the 2 owners do not have to be related to each other, don't have to be children. I just used that example. But in that instance, if that's your goal, then the right of survivorship would work. And the third way is, well, should I leave it via a will? A will is also a really good way to leave property, especially if you're concerned about or if you're really not concerned about the property until the time of your death, that they don't need it right away, then leave it to them in a will, because there are some good tax benefits from leaving things to people in a will, especially real property. The second question that I have is, will the individual have to pay inheritance taxes if the deed is changed in any of the above ways that we just mentioned? So if I leave it in trust of, or right of survivorship, or by will I have to pay inheritance tax? So what we need to remember is that inheritance tax is a tax you pay at the transfer of property from one person to another by reason of death. So the first thing that we have to do is a death has to happen. And if I'm leaving it by will, you know that means a death happened. So yes, you will have to pay inheritance tax if you leave the property in a will. If I leave it with right of survivorship, how does the person get to be the survivor? Well, they outlive the other person. So when that first person dies, yes, there will be a transfer, there will be an inheritance tax to be paid. If I leave it in trust of, there may not necessarily be an inheritance tax. If I say I'm leaving this property to my child Ronald, and it'll be in trust until he attains the age of 25. Well, the only thing Ronald has to do is to get to be 25. Nobody has to die. So if nobody has to die, then there's no inheritance tax due. They will collect that tax at the time when the deed is drafted, and you make and you draft the deed and you put the in trust of on there. Okay, let's see. Now, when you leave it by will, the one thing I do want to say, even if you leave it by will, yes, there will be an inheritance tax, but there are two things to remember. One, that there is an exception. Remember, we went over the inheritance tax exception? There is an exception for spouses, or I should call it an exemption for spouses. So if I leave the property to my spouse, I don't have to pay inheritance tax, because spouses don't have to pay inheritance tax at all. If I leave the property to my children, they don't have to pay inheritance tax. So there won't be any inheritance tax to worry about. And the second thing is that when you leave property via will, when people get property via death, I'm not talking about real property like houses and buildings, they get what's called a step up in basis. And what that means is, if the person that you're leaving the property to decides that they're going to sell it, in the end, they'll have to pay less tax on the profit. So that's a good thing to remember, that if you are, if the person doesn't need it immediately, and especially if you know that they're going to sell the property once they get it, leaving it to them by will is actually a way to help them pay less tax on the profit when they sell it eventually. My third question is, when the property is left to more than one person, who is responsible for the taxes and the upkeep? Well, that's interesting, because often the problem becomes for vacant properties that they don't leave it to anybody, so nobody takes care of it. But when you leave property to more than one person, all people are equally responsible. So everybody is responsible for paying the taxes. Everybody is responsible for major repairs to the property. And if you pay more than your share, so if they leave it to 3 people and you're paying more than 1/3 share of the taxes, or more than a 1/3 share of the upkeep, you are entitled to what we call contribution, which means the other people got to give me my money back, because I'm only supposed to pay 1/3.
Mm-hmm.
The problem becomes, sometimes you can't get contribution from folks just by asking for it, and you could end up in court trying to get your contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could end up selling a property in order to get your contribution. But the answer is really that everybody is entitled to it. But you can also get your contribution at a forced sale. So not only do you get what you would normally get, like your 1/3 part, but then you get the part that you've been paying for that you really shouldn't have had to pay for. So again, if the property is left to more than one person, who's responsible? They all are. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask, even though they didn't ask me, just remember that when you leave property to more than one person, you're not just leaving it to an individual. You're leaving it to that individual and all of the creditors that that individual has. You're dragging them along and you're putting them on the property. So I often really counsel clients in my private practice to not put more than 2 people on the deed at most, and find out what the credit history is. Especially, I see parents doing this with children. If you know your kids have a raggedy credit history, and there ain't no shame in that, things happen. Just don't put them on a property. There are other ways to benefit that child without tying up the property, which you can give the child, for example, the benefit of the property if it sells, but just don't put their name on it. So just remember that when you do that, you are dragging those creditors, you're exposing those creditors to judgment, that property to other creditors and other judgments that the people on the deed may have. 4, is it best to set the property up as a business, as a LLC, and can it be done out of the state of Delaware? I assume, are you talking, State Representative, about a property that may be a rental property?
Yeah. So the question is really when you have property or you're getting transfer property as a result of someone passing, is it best to because, a lot of young people or just people in general are starting businesses, and sometimes they want to put it in their business name versus their versus them personally. So just advice on, is it best to put it in an LLC or is it best to have it as your own property? I'm sure because of, tax write-offs and
that type of thing.
liability issues and things like that.
I wouldn't put the property in an LLC unless it's going to be used for commercial purposes. So if you were going to rent it out, that's a business. Put it in an LLC. Mm-hmm. If you're going to put a business office in it, that's a business. Put it in an LLC. But otherwise, the LLC can be another layer that's just unnecessary. What a LLC is, and I should explain that, it's initials for limited liability company. It's just a form of company that we set up, and we like it because it actually protects you against liability. See, if you have a rental property or a business property, people come and fall in front of your property. And there's some people out there that's looking to fall in front of your property. So you got to protect yourself. LLC is just one way to do that. Even if you have an LLC, adequate insurance is the first and best way to do that. And then you put the LLC on top of that. But what I will say, State Rep, is that if you are getting property given to you or bequeathed to you, before they give it to you, ask, could they put it in the name of the LLC directly? Because if you get it in your name first and then you transfer it, then you have to pay a transfer tax. And the transfer tax is based on the value of the property. And it can be kind of extensive. So you want to make sure that there's a real reason for transferring property that's individually in your name to an LLC, because there's going to be a cost to that. And if you have the opportunity to put the property directly into an LLC from the estate, and if it's not going to be used as a business, it may not even be necessary to do that. And I don't think at this point that Delaware is better than Pennsylvania in terms of LLC. At one time, Delaware was the mecca of corporations and LLCs, and we all ran there. Well, states like Pennsylvania saw that money leaving, so they changed their statute a little bit. And now I think that we are comparable to Delaware in terms of that statute. And remember, if you open up a business or LLC in Delaware, it could make you subject to Delaware law, of course, but also Delaware venue, which means you might have to go to court in Delaware. And that's not something that you want.
Excellent.
Okay. And the last question is the ruling still 5 years on a deed change before the state will put a lien on your property before you go into the nursing home? Yeah, this is something I talk to people about a lot. They don't often take me up on it, but I'm still talking. And I think what this question is talking about is the Medicaid lien.
Yep.
Medicaid.
The Medicaid lien.
Yes. Yeah. And listen, Medicaid is insurance that you, and assistance that you can receive if you need aid with your health care and you can't afford it. So I would never tell anybody, do not use Medicaid if you need it. Not Medicare, That's what you get by virtue of your age. Medicaid is what you get by virtue of your need and your inability to pay. So how many years do I need? Medicaid has what we call a look back period, and the look back period is 5 years. So when you go to apply, they'll look back over your assets that you had for the past 5 years. And even if you have already given it away, sold it away, traded away, they will count that in your asset picture when they're trying to decide whether or not you are in need of assistance. Because their thinking is, well, if you sold a house a year ago and that house was worth $100,000 or two, then why you need us? You should still have some money from that. And it used to be 3 years, then they increased it to 5 years. And I'm not even sure, you know, if when the country gets out of this COVID stuff, you might even think they were going to increase that look back period a little bit more. But the thing is, in 5 years, what they do is when you apply, they're looking at that to see if you will apply. But the more important thing is that if you get if you will qualify, and they don't tell you no as much as they tell you, you will qualify in X amount of years, and you will qualify if you spend down. Sometimes they want you to spend down your money to get to a qualifying level, which sounds crazy to most people, and it sounds a little crazy to me too. It's like you're sort of like, you have to try to balance. If I spend down this money and I get this Medicaid, is that worth it? If you can't, you know, if you're not beyond the 5 year look back period. But the other important thing to remember is that if you do take Medicaid, people think they take your house. I guess they don't really take your house as much as they put a lien against your house. So they put this lien against your house for the amount of care. And believe me, I have seen the packet that sometimes is this thick. They send it to me to let me know, when your client passes, this is what I'm going to ask for.
Yep.
So, and that's what happens. If they want to, they can go about the process of forcing a sale of the house in order to get their money. And that's why people say, Medicaid took my house, because they start a process in order to get their money back. Now, sometimes you can negotiate with them, sometimes you can't. It depends on the person you get, the amount that you owe, and the amount of assets that you have.
And the area you live in probably too.
There you go.
The area you live
in. You know that's going to be true. You know that's going to be true.
Because I had a case like that before you came on, and they were coming to get their money.
Okay. Sometimes they can be aggressive, right?
Yeah, well, they were saying, what they're saying is, listen, we'll sell it to you all, because the family was living in there, right?
Right.
The nieces, they said, we give you the first option because we don't want the house.
Right. We want the money.
Or we're going to sell it, and we take ours, and then and I seen that on one occasion, and I just started, but I'm sure it has happened on other occasions. It
does. They can be very aggressive. And remember, even though Medicaid is a federal money, it comes through the state. So the state that you're residing in, different states may be more or less aggressive about the collection of Medicaid. So you have to know that in Pennsylvania, they're not sleeping on it. They're asking about it. They're staying on top of it. They're sending out the bills. And maybe they're not as aggressive now during COVID. I hope that's what's happening. But at some point, they're going to, pick back up again, probably with collection activity. Yeah. And that's my 5 questions. But I do want to ask one more thing. I want to say, somebody asked me in the chat box about unclaimed property. No, the Registered Will doesn't deal with unclaimed property, except that sometimes you have to raise an estate in order to get unclaimed property.
Yes.
So you may end up coming through us anyway.
Yeah.
That was Dawn. I hope that was a good answer for you, Dawn.
See why I hired her?
No, I love it. Listen, I love it. This one,
this is the kind of information,
absolutely,
that we need, and we're bringing it out to you all. And this Zoom is really amazing.
Yeah.
Again, our office is open. We're open by appointment only. Tasha put up all our information. Our website, phila.gov/wills, /wills. That's our website. We're on Facebook, and we're on Twitter, and that's just simply PHLROW. You put those letters up, and you'll like our pages and like our information. We send out information weekly, and you can call us at our 686 number, 215-686-6250. And we answer the phones till 3, shut the phones down. But we now, for the first time in Registered Wills history, we have an answering service, because we never had it there. And I said, no, sometimes people aren't going to catch. They may not get off till 7 o'clock at night, and they want to call. So, leave a message. Another way, if you have any of these type questions, roll online at phila.gov and ask your question. And we have a team that works every day, sending out your questions to the different departments, whether it's a question on how much marriage fees are, or you have to get a real ID, so you need to come get a marriage record. We do all that online by asking us, and we'll go over everything. And we are booked. I think we're booked up through November, Terry. I think we're booked up through November on marriages. So like everybody's getting married.
Yep, towards the end of October. So we'll be starting in November to book new appointments. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And probate, we're pretty much booked. We're doing pro se, and we're doing it by appointment only, because of course we want to protect you, and we want to protect our staff. So we can't have people just coming in randomly. You have to have the mask, and we have all the sanitation, the wipes or whatever you need. But I just want to close, but I'll allow you to close as well. This is the kind of information that I campaigned on, and that was one, educate you about what we do in the Registrar of Wills at City Hall, room 180, or the marriage room 414, I think, the marriage department. And then I said that I was going to do something about decreasing the amount of tangled titles, and that's our probate deferment initiative. And then I said I want to diversify the office, and voila, we're diverse. Plan your estate. Prepare your heirs. Let them know where them wills are, and protect your assets. And that's why we're going around, we're teaching everybody, and we want to start going to the legislators so we can introduce new legislation to help us maybe do a 5-year moratorium or whatever. I'm going to all the departments of the water department and see if we can put this information in the water bill so everybody can get it. Because some people may not realize that they're sitting in a property that is at risk of any type of catastrophe that can happen. If you don't have homeowners insurance, I mean, especially during this day of time with the climate change and the weather and, all that other stuff. So I am so grateful for you all giving me the vote of confidence and electing me. And I love this job. I love helping people. I really do. And my staff love helping people. It's like really everybody that's, waking up is like, how do we help people? And I really appreciate that you're one of the first ones that had me in front of your audience and during this COVID time. And you're doing really a good job, I think. And thank you so much, Morgan, for bringing me to your audience.
No, listen, I mean, I have been getting texts, literally phone calls, messages in the message box, just singing your praises and just really saying thank you for providing us this information. And I will be very honest, I didn't know much about what your office did, what the role was. I mean, and I worked in city council. So, for you to just bring this information to us is priceless. Absolutely priceless. And, I do want to definitely give a shout out to my staff, Dawn Cohen, who is
Thank
on
you,
her
Dawn.
but asking questions too, trying to get some tips. I want to thank her, and I want to thank Gwen Ford as well as Angelica Sanders, who, helped, me understand the importance of this conversation. And as you stated, representing a district where a good 30 to 40% of residents in the 192nd are 65 and older, these are conversations that, we really need to have. And again, if we want to continue the legacy of our grandparents and their great grandparents to own property, to own assets, to generate wealth, we have to begin having these conversations.
People have worked so hard for this state representation.
Hard.
Yeah.
Hard.
They worked so hard for this.
We lost so many properties in my family. I just think of it. I drive by it and I'm like, oh, we used to own that, And so it's sad because it's a lot. It's just the financial literacy part. It's just the financial. I say right now, just write your will right now, sign it, we witness it until you can get to one of our clinics or workshops. And we really strongly advise for you to sit down with that professional.
Yeah.
It's like we've buy them nice purses and shoes and stuff. Take down and buy, protect your generational wealth so your family won't go through these hardships.